Hi everyone, this is BritSimon. So I've got what I consider to be a very, very important update for you this afternoon. So for all DV 2024 people that are yet to be scheduled, for DV 2025 folks and beyond, basically, this is a really quite important update. It involves the sort of the movement of cases from one embassy to another, and quite a significant change in strategy that KCC employ. Now, a couple of days ago, or was it yesterday, I posted a video about Ankara and Accra, and explaining to people, particularly for DV 2025, but also some people who are sort of trapped in DV 2024, explaining what's so bad about the position to be tied into Ankara or Accra embassies in DV25, for example. I'd recorded that video twice. The first time I recorded it, towards the end of my recording, which was already fairly long, talking about Ankara and Accra, I went into a bit of a rant talking about KCC and kind of howling at the moon to KCC, and actually addressed KCC and the government, suggesting that they needed to make a very important change to their procedures in terms of when they would allow people to move from one embassy to another. I ranted for probably a full 10 minutes, and some of it was pretty excited, shall we say. And because it was so excited, and there were some words in there that I probably shouldn't have used, I counted to 10 and I re-recorded the whole video. I'll probably look back at that other video, but I don't think I'll publish it, because it's, I'm trying to encourage the government to do the right thing, not necessarily just shout at them. But funnily enough, I recorded that a few days ago. Since then, Curtis Morrison posted a link, fairly innocent link, to an update on the FAM guide. Now, FAM is the Foreign Affairs Manual, and it is the guide that is used by consular officers in adjudicating cases, in all aspects of adjudicating cases. It's a guide that tells them how to do their work, and it's actually quite a useful reference tool for us, because it gives us insight into how the government sees the rules, the laws, the procedures, and that sort of thing. It's not, strictly speaking, the letter of the law, but it is a description of their processes. And sometimes their processes, they get confused, those things, for the law, right? And so they make these processes and procedures, sometimes without any support from the law. And that's when they get into a sticky mess where lawyers can say, well, hang on a minute, you've decided this procedure, you've decided to apply some rule, but you've got no support for that in the law. One of those things, funnily enough, was the way that they were behaving about with regard to where you have to apply for your interview, right? And how the government has made up this this rule, that they call it a rule, that you have to apply for your visa at a particular post. And if let's say you're a resident of Accra, just because I was talking about that, if you're a resident of Accra and you're a DV lottery winner, and Accra won't get to your case because they're determined to not take cases, as far as the government has been concerned, that's okay. If your chances are lost, because you're assigned to Accra, tough luck on you. That's been their perspective. That's been their position. And so let me show you what's changed, because it's a very significant change. So let's see. If I show you here the usual place of application, for example, this is a section. Now, what I've done is I've got the updated guidance from the FAM, which I'll show you in a moment, But I wanted to firstly show you what the statement was, or what the position was, as of March 16th, right? So I've gone on to the Wayback Machine. Some of you may be aware of this, but this is a useful tool that you can see older versions of current pages. And so the Wayback Machine basically allows you to go and look at how did this particular page look, up until a few days ago, or from a specific point in time. And it's actually quite useful. I've used this many times to try and figure out what the changes actually mean. So if we look at one of these statements here, it says here, as a general rule, an applicant in the United States should apply for the visa in the post of the consular district of the applicant's last foreign residence. That's the only consular section required to accept the case for processing, although another consular section might do so as a matter of discretion. Then there's people who are abroad, right? So application of a non-resident physically present in district. It says department regulations provide that an IV unit must accept an application from an application physically present in the consular district, even though not a resident of that district, if the applicant expects them to remain in the consular district throughout the several months that it normally takes to process an application and can legally do so. That several months time period includes the period of time before the interview and the period of time that could happen after the interview. And so what has happened is that several months wording has meant that if you traveled, let's say you were in Accra and you traveled to Nairobi, and maybe you could prove that you were physically present in Nairobi, you might have been denied an interview at Nairobi by Nairobi embassy, because they could say, well, yeah, but if we put you on 221G, that could last 3 or 4 months, and you have no legal permission to reside or to remain in Kenya for that period of time, right? Now I'm using Accra and Nairobi, and it's not about those two particular posts, but this was the general principle. And there's lots of other sort of wording that in the old rules, which is what I'm showing you on screen here, it was very difficult for people to actually get moved to another location. So if I now flip over to the changed document, there's some very significant changes here. So for example, in the usual place of application, right? The way that this document is updated has more recent changes in this sort of slightly red, or I don't know, purple color or something, different color. And so that's how you can see how the wording has changed. But if you really want to know what the wording was before, then you have to use something like the Wayback Machine to actually go back and see the previous wording. And it's only really by comparing to the previous wording that you understand the significance of some of the changes, right? So if we look at the usual place of application, right? As a general rule, IV and diversity visa applicants, they've actually called out DV applicants in particular in several places in these changes, should apply for a visa in the consular district where they are resident, and an applicant in the United States should apply for the visa at the post in the consular district of the applicant's last foreign residence, right? So what they've done is they've inserted IV and diversity visa applicants up to that place. So they've added a section in here that calls out, where you should apply, but then goes on to say, unless the department directs otherwise, post is required to accept the case for processing. So basically, that first point is no real change, apart from the fact that it calls out specifically diversity applicants, and IV applicants, and it sort of reaffirms the rule or the policy that the government had applied earlier. But this next point is extremely important. It says, alternatively, unless the department directs otherwise, applicants may take their visa application in the consular section having jurisdiction over their place of physical presence, if the applicant can establish that they will be able to remain in that period for the for the period required to process the application. And then it defines the period of time necessary to remain in that location as well. And this is where the big change is really made. It says the time it normally takes to process the application should not include the potential time it might take for administrative processing, as an applicant may choose to depart the country while such processing is pending. That's always been possible. You can go to your interview, and let's say they put you on 221G, and you could say, well, I've got to leave the country. I've got to go on business. I have to leave the country, so I'll need my passport back, please. And when you decide you're going to issue my visa, I'll give you my passport back so that you can stamp in the visa. That's always been a possibility. But what's new here is that physical presence is now the test required, and you don't have to be physically present for many months, which means that it has vastly reduced the requirement for how long you need to be in the country. And it means that you don't need to have a residence permit anymore. Some embassies have been requiring people to show that they have a permit, a visa, allowing them to be resident in a particular country as a condition for accepting them at their post. That requirement is now gone. Okay, this is a big deal. And it's gone because they're saying that you simply have to prove to their satisfaction, can establish to the satisfaction of the consular officer, that they will be able to remain at the consular district for the time it normally takes to process an application. Normally being, well, you have to have your medical in country, typically. That's normally the case. And then you have the interview. And then normally you might be expected to wait for, let's say, a week after the interview while they print up your visa. But in the old days, they could tack on a few months and say, well, if you can't be here for 3 months or 4 months because you could be placed on AP, on 221G, then we're not going to accept you at the post, right? And so this is a very big deal. This is going to be important for people. It goes on. There's some interesting wording here, and it talks about the applicant's ability to remain in the consular district. The consular section may take into consideration the applicant's ability to do so legally and in accordance with the requirements of the host country, among other relevant factors. So, in other words, as long as you're legal for a reasonably short period of time to be in another country, let's say a month, right? As long as you're able to be there for that period of time, you can show that you are physically able to be there. Now, there is also wording here that's important. It says the applicant's prospective ability to obtain a visa to apply for admission to the country where the consular district is located does not qualify an applicant as being physically present in the consular district. Okay, but if you are satisfied that the applicant will be physically present by the time of the application, you are permitted to accept the transfer ahead of the applicant's relocation to permit case preparation and reduce logistical delays upon the applicant's arrival. Okay, so what that means is if you can convince an embassy that you will be able to travel to their location and your ability to be physically present in that location is assured, you have a visa, you have the ability to stay there, you have the finances to stay there, all of those good things, right? Then you can say, hey, I would like to be assigned to your post, and I can prove to you that I can stay there legally. And even though I'm not there today, I will be there in a month's time, so I want you to take my case, right? Now, that's a big deal. That is a very big departure from where they've been at before. Now, this update has only been part of the document, the process for about 3 weeks. As I'm recording the video today, it's about 3 weeks ago. It's dated the 8th of May. It was actually updated on the 10th of May, according to the Wayback Machine there. but it's dated May the 8th, so that's only 3 weeks ago. Now, there are going to be some posts, some embassies that will have no clue about this. This hasn't been widely published. And so there's going to be some time when posts will basically not really understand this is the new way of applying the policy. So if you need to make a change in your embassy location, and you can satisfy the consular officers or the embassy that you will be able to remain there longer, then you can use this policy. But if I were you, I would literally be copying sections from the policy that make it clear that the embassy must accept your case. And why am I using that word must? Well, must and may are two different words in English that mean slightly different things. If I say to you, you may do something, it gives you permission to do something, but it doesn't require you to do that thing. If I say to you, you must do something, you are required to do that thing, right? And so the question is, have the embassies been told that they must accept people who are physically present? Well, if I scroll up here, there's a whole new section here. And if you look at this section, it talks about consular section must accept for processing. This is also about moving. Must accept, right, as opposed to may accept for processing, if the applicant is physically present in the district and you conclude the applicant is able to remain for the time required for processing. Okay, so there is this, and you conclude the applicant is able to remain for the time required. There is that caveat to it, but the language is clear. This is a must on the embassies. They must take people who are able to prove that they are physically present. So if you have moved from, let's say, Accra, I'm picking on Accra, but Accra or Ankara or any of these embassies that are behaving badly, if you have moved to a new location, you may have contacted the embassy in the past and they may have said, well, we're not going to accept you because we don't believe that you're resident here. You can now recontact that embassy and say, point to them the guide that says, I am physically present in this location. I'm legally able to be here. I can remain here for X number of weeks more, perfectly legally, and therefore you must accept me. Now, I would be very careful to not tell an embassy things like you must accept me, right? You've got to be a little bit careful. You get more with honey than you get with sticks, some sort of saying like that. You're going to do better by winning them over. So you can say to them that, hey, great news, you declined me for accepting my case before. I note that the FAM guidance has been updated, and it now says that you are able to accept my case if I can show you that I'm physically present and that I can remain physically present for the period of time it would normally take to process the case, not including 221G. Okay, so there are some very important meanings behind the wording changes here. I have to say some of it is badly worded. That must word is important, and it changes into may in different parts of this wording, so it's kind of confusing. I expect over time they will refine it, but there are clearly there is an intention to allow movement and to enable processing of cases that would otherwise be ruined, by sort of bad behavior of embassies, right? And there's various rules here. There's quite a lot to read here. It says here, for example, different rules govern consular jurisdiction to accept and adjudicate certain clearly approvable IV petitions in accordance with DHS delegated authority. I mean, it's again, they're sort of worried about clearly approvable petitions. Here's another specific thing about diversity visa cases. You may accept jurisdiction for processing a DV case if the applicant meets the residency requirements or is physically present in your district. I'm sad that they put may accept there when the summary of the same policy shows must accept, right? There is a difference between may and must, and it's a very important difference. But it does give, as usual, the discretion to accept or refuse requests of persons neither resident nor present, right? So if you contact an embassy and you're not actually there, then that embassy has the right to decline your request. Whereas if you're there, and if you can prove that you can stay there for a reasonable period of time, then they must, according to this wording, then they must accept your request to transfer your case to that location. So that's all really important. Now, how will KCC operate in this? Is quite interesting because KCC have this this queue of cases in AV status. Up to now, they have been absolutely unwilling to move cases out of the AV queue. So once you're in the AV queue, and to be in AV status, you need to be DS260 processed and your number is current. Once those two things are true, you're put into a queue, basically a spreadsheet, where your number is added to that spreadsheet and you're now in a queue and you're locked into that embassy. That has been an absolute locked-in situation as far as KCC is being concerned in the past. And what this policy change may change their behavior about that. But I can't be 100% certain that they are going to change their behavior on that point. So it may still be important to try and get these approvals cleared up before you become current. Because if your DS260 is processed and you become current, then you're immediately locked in AV status. But the fact that they now accept that DV applications can be moved around from embassy to embassy, I think their procedures for the AV queue will have to be revised. It may not immediately happen, but it will happen, I think, hopefully soon. I hope so. So that's an important point also. There are some other points in here. I'll put the link to this below the video so that you can read the document yourself. There's a reaffirmation of the various homeless processing posts. There's some wording about those homeless processing posts, and there's a particular point here that's kind of interesting. So there is more stuff to read about here, but I wanted to keep the video fairly short if I could. I've already blown that; it's 22 minutes already. But I do encourage you to come and read this, and also read the Wayback Machine version of this, so that you can see how the wording has changed in a fairly dramatic way. Okay, everybody. Have a think about this as to whether it can actually save your case. If you are in one of those embassies, you're a DV2024, and you're in Ankara or you're in Accra, and your case number is above the case numbers that's going to get any hope, and you have the ability to move to a better location, then I would say use that ability, move now, do that as quickly as you possibly can, and contact KCC and ask them to move your case, but also at the same time contact the embassy in the location that you've moved to. Show to them that you're physically present in their area, and either between you or the embassy, somebody can, either you or the embassy can hopefully impress upon KCC the importance of moving your case out of the AV queue into the embassy that's willing to accept you. They have done that in the past, but it's been very rare in the past because the bar or the ability to convince the receiving embassy, the new embassy, was very difficult. Now that should be easier, and so the new embassy should be looking at these guidance rules, should be more willing to help you in moving to their location. I don't suggest you all go to the very busiest locations. I don't expect you all to go anywhere, actually. Most of you don't need to move. But for some of you, where you absolutely are going to lose your chance of getting your green card because of difficulties at certain embassies, this could be a lifesaver. This could actually make the difference between getting your green card or not. And in DV 2024, I think there is still time to save some of your cases. So please take this very seriously, and please give me some feedback. Let me know what reactions you get. I definitely want you to be copying sections of this document into your emails when you request a change, because I don't want you to refer to how the guidance has changed. So I'll create a text block that you can copy and paste into your emails, and I'll put that in on my blog, so that you'll be able to make a formal request as quickly as possible. It does say, by the way, that you need to request this in writing. And that could be by letter, it could be by email, and so on. So email is obviously the best way. All right. Okay. Yeah, and it says here, request the receiving unit. Make the request by letter, email, or other written or electronic formats as the IV unit allows. That they're referring to faxes, probably. It says there is no prescribed form or format for such a request. But the applicant must send the request along with the justification for the request to the intending receiving IV unit. IV unit meaning the consular offices or embassy that you want to move to, right? Okay, everybody, let's jump on this. For those of you that can change your trajectory here, and hopefully we can have some happy results from this. I hope that the government is going to be good to their word here and will start accepting these requests as necessary as soon as possible. But let's work on that together and see if we can get some of these cases pushed through. And as I say, I would like to get some feedback on my blog at BritSimonSays.com about what progress you make individually, what works, what doesn't work, what the reaction is from some embassies. I fully expect some embassies to decline such requests because they won't know the guidance has changed. So that could easily happen, but we need to help them through the understanding, right? Okay. All right, everybody. Thanks for your time and attention today. I hope this is going to be good news for some of you. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye now.